Hello and welcome. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Martin Humphries and I've called myself the Bod from Budley. Budley is where I live, but my real mission in life, and always has been, is about trying to get the best out of everybody who's around me. And that's been in a variety of different locations. First of all, as a teacher. Secondly, as somebody who was a professional presenter who travelled around the world running training events and was used to speaking at keynote events with several thousand people quite often. So it's a world of living in a world where we're affecting change in terms of what's happened. I spent a lot of time working very, very intimately with companies trying to change their culture and get their culture focused upon the customer. I can't tell you how excited I am. This is my very, very first broadcast, and I need to make sure my enthusiasm doesn't just drive my mouth, and I do everything all the time. So at the moment, I'm so excited and enthusiastic, and I thought I'm going to do my very first podcast. And I went home and I had a walk by the beach, and I was thinking to myself, who could I invite for my very, very first podcast? And I thought of Scotty Mills, because at the beginning of this year, I went to see Scotty Mills, and he, in my opinion, was one of the most inspirational speakers that I've ever heard. He was extraordinary. I walked into this room and it was full of that strength, the feeling of the camaraderie of all the Marines who'd come to support him. It was incredible. I actually spoke to him before he even started, as he was doing that, walking around just getting his head together, and empathised with him as a presenter. And I sat through the most extraordinary story, accompanied a little bit later by his book, which I read and thought was amazing. So the Marines is something that I kind of know a little bit about, because I actually went to school just across the road from the Marines at St. Peter's. And while I was there, several of the kids in St. Peter's had dads who were in the Marines. And we used to go down to Lympstone on a day off on a Sunday and so forth. And I was always absolutely amazed by what was referred to at that time as the Tarzan course. I'm sure it's called something different now. But at that time, it was just extraordinary. And I remember going to the Marines and being kind of overawed by the place. And it is a very, very impressive place. So I kind of decide, all right, I'm going to do my very first podcast. And can I get Scotty Mills to come and be with me at my very first podcast? Well, the day's here, and he's actually here. And he responded positively. I can't tell you, I was like a 3-year-old jumping up and down, so excited when I got an email back from him saying, yeah, I'll do that for you on the 17th, which is today. So I was so excited. I was, as people say, stoked, ramped up and ready to go. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with what I view as one of the most inspiring presenters who I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot of people around the world. So please give a very, very warm welcome to Scotty Mills. Who is Scotty Mills and what has he done? Talk about having got a career which is just full of all sorts of achievements. Perhaps, Scotty, you can talk us through your career, because you're a former media operations officer, head of rehab and logistical planning officer of the Royal Marines, former head of physical training, performance and sport and the Royal Marines. You're a board member of the culture panel of UK Sport. And charity, you're an advisor of care after combat and senior advisor of B Military. Does that sum you up quite well?
Well, yeah, that's part of it, definitely. Thanks very much, Martin, for the wonderful introduction and for inviting me along. It is a pleasure to be here and share with you some of my experiences and lessons that I've learned along the way. My name's Scotty. I've just come off the back of a 32-year career in Her Majesty's, now His Majesty's, Royal Marines, Britain's Commandos, the Green Berets, where in my last job I was head of performance for all 6,500 of our Royal Marine Green Beret Commandos, both from a physical training perspective, but also from a mental fortitude perspective. Supreme privilege of a job, working with some incredible people where, I did end up being the highest ranking black Royal Marine officer in history, which, with some hindsight, is something that I'm actually really proud of. You know, I've got lots of experiences and lessons I can share with you that I've learned along the way, and so many people have helped to shape my life and make me a better person, which I think is something that I'm extremely proud of. You know, I've since gone on, since leaving the Marines, to work across with multitude of people and teams, helping them to grow, much like yourself and your experiences that you've done, working with teams at the very top of their game, from hospitality to finance teams to sports teams. I've worked with the England football team. I've worked with teams from different sports. I've worked with Apple and BMW and IBM and Slimming World, European Space Agency, the Home Office, and many others as well. I see this as privileged work. When I left the Marines, I thought it was important to just take a step back and just to think, what's going to motivate me? What's going to get me out of bed? That Simon Sinek, what is your why?
Right.
What's going to drive you now? And I put some thought to that whilst writing my book, and I worked out what my why is. And my why is about life fulfillment. The life fulfillment I get from trying to inspire others to achieve their own impossible dreams, just like I got to do. I like to keep my feet firmly on the ground, for sure. I remember where I come from. Speak about that in a minute, I'm sure. But with my background, I think it's important to remain grounded, to leave your ego at the door, and to be yourself, and hopefully, like I am now, in a position to be able to help others. And I feel so super privileged to be able to do that.
I think it's truly extraordinary, and I mean extraordinary, and I use that advisedly, because a lot of people are quite ordinary in the way they set about things, but you've always set extraordinarily high expectations, not of yourself, but of all the people around you. And the association and the link that makes to performance is extraordinary as well. So most people in most companies in the current climate at the moment, and I spend quite a bit of time working with different businesses, are very concerned about their business performance because times are hard. And when times are hard, people revert to actually different kind of mentality in the way that they approach doing their job. And I'm fascinated about making that link to performance. So for me, a bit I didn't declare about myself is that I used to referee rugby matches at first-class level, and my biggest strength association with you was actually when you talked about the training that you did with the World Cup team when Sir Clive Woodward now, came down and brought all the Marines down. And I know all those people. I actually have refereed most of the people who came down to Woodbury, and down to Lympstone, not Woodbury. Woodbury's just up the road, down to Lympstone. And so my association and understanding where they were and how they felt was really, really important. That resonated incredibly well with me. So let's go back, Scotty, right to the very beginning. Because I have read your book, but I also listened to you talk, and I asked you in the car park before we came in here. I still remember the story of you walking down in Peckham, in South London, and you're walking along and you've got your skates with you. And the thing I wanted to know was, were they roller skates or were they ice skates? And you told me that you did both. And then from there, carry on the story and tell me what actually happened.
Well, I come from South London, so a very proud South Londoner. I originally started out in Peckham and was bounced around a little bit as a young person. And I eventually landed, was adopted by my nan and granddad.
Yeah.
Who, my granddad's like a best mate, my mentor, my spirit, and my hero.
He's called Harry, isn't he?
Harry, that's right. And he's 5'2", only a short little bloke, 19 tattoos that he got in India during the war, I think after he'd had a few drinks. And actually, I do remember that he had a Bengal tiger tattooed on his chest in that old Indian ink.
Oh.
And sat astride the tiger across his whole chest was Britannia herself, with the Union Jack shield on one arm and the Strident in the air on another arm. And he was my hero. Yet still, lads come from where I do often have limited opportunities in life, I would say. And my trajectory was probably, from what was expected of me, was join a London gang, go on drugs, go to prison, die early. That was my likely trajectory.
But you also were a Millwall supporter, weren't you?
I was. You know, I'll tell you a story around that time. I remember I was 7 or 8 years old. Don't tell this one very often. 7 or 8 years old and went on a school trip down to Buckingham Palace.
Okay.
To go and see the changing of the guard, looking through the gates. Didn't know what I was going to become then. And I remember this because it's a negative story. And I remember the teacher come over to a group of us. All the other kids looked just like me, with my sort of background. And they said that, you know, you can look through the gates, but people like you don't get to go in places like that. This was in the 70s. It was a different era. But that negative reinforcement of know your place.
Limiting your self-belief right from the beginning.
People tell you those things enough, you start to believe it, certainly as a child. Even as an adult, you get told those things. You start to think that of yourself. And, you know, we can circle back to that a little bit later in our conversation. But, you know, I remember as a teenage lad now, I was into ice skating, into roller skating. I used to love all that. You know, my nan and granddad, they had less than nothing. And they'd saved really hard for a couple of years for me to have these brown suede Bauer skates. I'd picture the scene. I had burgundy leg warmers, two-tone jeans, a Sergio Tacchini tracksuit with detachable arms that I was very proud of. And you know, my afros were so big, I once found a full-size HB pencil in my hair I didn't even know was there. And you know, typical South London lad. And I was going down to the local ice rink in a place called Streatham, actually, which is near Peckham. And skates were over my shoulder, and I started walking down the road, and it started to rain. I didn't want to get my skates rusted. I just had them bought for me. I had a bit of respect for them. And I dived into the shop, the first shop that I could see. So there I am in the shop frontage now, looking up and down the high street, waiting for the rain to stop. And what I've inadvertently done is that I've walked into the Royal Navy and Royal Marines recruiting office by accident. Isn't it funny in life? Sometimes you turn left or you turn right. Or maybe it rains or it doesn't rain. And it changes the direction and the vector of your life. We've all had moments like that.
Sure.
So now there I am in the shop frontage. I'm getting a tap on the shoulder from this Royal Marine Sergeant recruiter who's just come out of the office. And he says, you know, you look like a fit lad. Can you do pull-ups? He's doing his job, isn't he? I said, I can, actually. So he's now dragged me inside. I was quite fit as a young kid. I used to love running. Dragged me inside. I got my skates over my shoulder still, and he's got me hanging off the pull-up bar. I'm doing like 25, 30. I'm joking. I did 4. He said something to me that was a total polar opposite of the messaging that I'd been receiving to date. He said, young man, I can see some potential in you. Have you ever thought about joining the Marines? Truth was that I hadn't. The only thing I'd heard about the Marines was on the television. I knew that they'd been involved with the Falklands War, which was about 4 years previously to them. That was all I'd heard. Maggie's Boys, I seem to have ringing in my head, but that's all I'd ever heard of them. I didn't know the difference between the Green Berets and the Red Berets, as an example. The Marines and the Paras. And he gave me some paperwork. I went back to see the one person who I knew that had my back, that didn't want anything from me. That's my old granddad. I knew he'd served alongside some of the Marines in the war. He was a boxing champ, actually.
Okay.
And he said to me, son, he said, that is the longest and the hardest training in the world. But if you get through that and earn your Green Beret, it will change your life forever. And of course, he was right.
So it's set your goal.
Well, life opportunities, you know, I see 3 types of opportunity.
Okay.
The opportunity that comes up, it screams by, you never even see it, and it's gone. That's the first type. The second type that comes up, and you see it, and you think, you know, it says to you, here's a chance, here's an opportunity to change your life. Do you want to take it? And oftentimes, you know, people might think to themselves or internally say to themselves, well, I'm not quite ready for that yet, or come up with a reason why they're not going to try and take that opportunity. And that opportunity then goes and never comes back. Or you got the third type of opportunity, the one that comes up and says, here is your chance to change everything, to get yourself away from this routine, mundane direction in life, which probably won't amount to much. Here's your one chance. Are you going to take me? So, you know, by taking it to see my granddad, I applied. You know, I applied for the Marines. A few months later, after doing I had to go back to the careers office to go through the different recruiting elements that you got to do. You got to have a pre-joining fitness test. You got to have a medical. You do psychometric tests. Make sure you're not a nutter. And you go through that. And then all of a sudden then, aged around 17, I received an invitation down to the Commando Training Centre of the Royal Marines, down in Devon, beautiful part of the world, Limpstone. And when I walked in, a daunting place for anybody to go.
Oh, it is daunting.
Especially a young man.
Yeah, sure.
You know, bearing in mind I was head of performance for all the Marines.
Right.
Daunting place to go. When I walked in, I saw these instructors with their green berets on, who were living their lives by a different metric to me. They were talking continually about humility, integrity, striving for understated excellence. I'm not sure I entirely knew what it all meant, but I can tell you for a fact that I was hooked straight away. I mean, you speak...
Let me just stop you for a moment and take you back when you were at school so that I can relate to what it was like. So when you got into bother at school or you got into jams at school, what would generally happen?
Well, my nan and granddad were of an age where, you know, they couldn't really deal with any of that. And I was pretty much allowed to go and do my own thing, which probably wasn't the world's greatest idea as a young teenage boy. You know, I'm a Millwall football fan. I was involved with all those shenanigans as a youngster.
Do you remember a particular teacher or particular teachers who influenced you in any way?
One.
Go on.
Never spoken about them.
Go
on. Her name was Miss Clout. One of those.
Appropriate names for a teacher. Miss Clout.
Typical teachers from the sort of 70s and 80s that you would expect. Strict Victorian values. I'll tell you something that I remember that I've used every single day for the rest of my life.
Go on.
Every single morning we turned up after our registration. We would all stand up as a class, military style, and recite 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2, all the way up to 12 times 12. We did it every single day. Every single day. And that drill, that skill, I continue to use every day for the rest of my life. I'm thankful of that. And that's that discipline. The discipline maybe from a parent or a teacher or a loved one or whatever, where hopefully you discipline the children, or your own children if you're a parent, in the hope that one day they will be self-disciplined enough to be able to do it for themselves. You know, when I first joined the Marines, things like making your bed, sorting your kit and equipment out, preparing properly every single day, those are skills which help you to put those bedrock values in place. Work ethic, team cohesion, selflessness.
Can we do a big public credit to all those teachers who every day remorselessly and relentlessly try and actually give the very best to the biggest opportunity for all those kids?
Couldn't agree more. And I do get invited back to schools, and I work with school trusts as well on many occasions. I see some incredible work being conducted by teachers and teaching staff and the support staff in the background as well. I've got a really close relationship with the school in the Isle of Wight, Christ the King, it's called. And this was through an ex-Marine whose mate he's just taken over as a head teacher. And I went there and did some work with his leadership team, but then with the teachers, subsequently on another trip, and then subsequently on another trip with the students themselves. And you see the difference that people who truly care, teachers that truly care about their young people, trying to help them on the stepping stones to success in life.
You won't have watched it because you've been away, but Freddie Flintoff is trying very, very hard to assemble another cricket team after the success of his first effort. And when you watch the programme, it's extraordinary to watch as a programme because all the kids in that particular programme behave like the kids who I taught, or some of the kids who I taught in Sheffield. Their behaviour is outrageous at times.
I'm sure. A thankless task, I suspect.
Oh, it's hard. No, it's very, very hard. And it takes it a lot out of you personally, I think. Yeah. I used to run a unit in a school for kids who were kicked out of lessons or kicked out of school, and I used to spend a lot of time with them on a daily basis. One of the things that I discovered, and it was an important discovery, is that kids are extraordinary. They have incredible potential, and my responsibility, I always felt, was to try and unleash or actually exercise to make sure that we could release that potential in some way. I think kids are extraordinary. The problem is the narrative around them sometimes is not matching to what their capability is.
Harnessing that potential and getting the very best out of our young people is down to people like us, right? I think so as well. When, talk about things going on in the world, wrong in the world, and there's too much social media or whatever it is, actually, we're in a position of responsibility to be able to actually do something about it.
Absolutely.
And it is down to us as the leaders. We are the leaders now. Got those experiences that we've developed. And if things are going wrong, then I would like to think that we're in a position to be able to do something about it, which is why I like to give a little bit back. Remember where you came from. Leave your ego at the door. No blame, no excuses. And hopefully go and inspire our young people to get on the stepping stones to success in life and develop those qualities, values and behaviours that the Marines taught me.
It's an incredible story. I mean, it really is an incredible story. But if we kind of dig a bit deeper to that, okay, let's dig a little bit deeper. So you're about to go and join the Marines in Lympstone. You're on the train, getting to Exeter St David's. You get off at Exeter St David's, then you get the train, which goes to Exmouth, and it's actually a stop all on its own at Lympstone, the Marine camp. And you walk into the Marine camp with a bunch of other kids who are also there on their beginning. Was that your experience or not?
You've just transported me straight back to 1987.
Okay.
And every Royal Marine will know this moment where you get off the train at Exeter St David's, you get on the little Thomas the Train engine that takes you all the way along.
But a beautiful view down the coast, down the river.
Not sure you really appreciate it at that time because some anxiety and nerves are kicking in. And it probably should be because your whole life's about to change. Then at Lympstone Commando Halt, we call it.
Okay.
Which is where it's got its own train station. And you're only allowed to alight off that train if you have business with the Marines.
Okay.
I think it must be the only.
It's quite unique. It is quite unique.
It must be.
So how are you feeling at that moment, Scotty?
Trepidation. Probably fear of the unknown. And we could talk about fear a little bit later on, maybe when we're talking about operations.
Okay. But you're not with your Millwall fans. You're not with your mates. You're not with everybody you know. This is a completely strange environment.
You feel alone, even though you're in the company of people who you're probably going to get to know for the rest of your life.
Okay.
But you didn't know that at the time. So as you get off the train and everybody's sort of, some lads are speaking to each other, it's probably nervously, maybe bragging about how quickly they can run a mile or 10 miles or whatever it is and trying to just suss out what you think of the competition at the time. They're not, of course.
Are you running that video inside your head of you going back?
I am. I never talk about this.
Okay.
This was a moment. It's a moment where everything changes again. But as soon as you step off that train, a drill instructor is there to greet you, would be the wrong to meet you.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, literally, as soon as you step off that train, I think that's the moment where you transit from being a civilian to military. Step off the train. It's a moment that's worth recording,
okay,
I would say, because all of a sudden, they've got you. The drill instructor's there. He's there to meet you. He corrals you all together. He puts you in a semblance of sort of 3 lines, 3 ranks, we call it.
Okay.
And then from that point on, you're marching around. You're in the Marines. Even though you haven't attested yet to the Queen, which you do that evening. Even though you haven't had a haircut yet, which they do that day.
So your afro hair all disappeared, did it?
Yeah. It went that day and never really came back.
Oh, really?
Well, you can see. Look.
Okay.
That's a moment, looking back on it. I'm not sure I've articulated it like that ever before. But you've got that out of me. That's a moment. That's a moment where I think just looking back, that's my last moment as a civilian was being on the train.
Sure. I think people talk about those first 4 minutes about making an impression. And those first 4 minutes, as you wind that video in your head, you can remember down to minute detail because your stress levels will have increased the capacity that you have to record exactly how you felt. It's not just remembering the information, it's also the emotions that go with that.
That's probably right. I mean, when you see cataclysmic things happen around you, life-changing moments, I don't know, 9/11 or when Princess Diana died, that heightened response, you remember what you were doing,
absolutely.
Right? It's probably similar.
Down to minute detail.
The detail. I can smell it. I can smell Limestone at that moment, just thinking about it.
How did that affect you when you became head of performance?
Well, that's decades later. Those experiences, right, and all that time in the Marines and that knowledge and experiences you built up, you like to think that you would use them for the benefit of the young people who are coming through that system.
Okay.
So, I worked at Limestone several times, a physical training instructor, as an officer in command. I worked as head of rehabilitation, all at Limestone. And those experiences we have, whether that's getting off the train or whether, I got injured in my training, tore a hamstring. And those experiences you go through, you remember what it was like for the recruit. So now you're in a position of responsibility and leadership. You need to think back what it was like being a recruit, put yourself back in their shoes, and then hopefully help them get back rehabilitated or become better in some way so that you can actually help those young people along because you've been there yourself. You know that experience. And that experience helps you to get the very best back out of them. Critical.
Oh, absolutely. So in terms of performance, it was that memory, and people talk about muscle memory or even brain memory about what actually happens. You remember all of that detail. So just tell me one thing. Did you ever go through a period of time anticipating and thinking, I can't do this. This is just too hard?
Well, of course, those that say they can and those that say they can't are both usually right. And with hindsight, looking back, I was quite physically strong.
Mm-hmm.
I was physically fast, which meant that I didn't really struggle on any of the physical evolutions. So, there are other elements. There are professional elements. There are bits like, what you're going to be like when you're living in the field. How are you going to perform in those environments when you've got huge amounts of kit on your back and they're pushing you to your limit?
Did you think it was a competition?
The Marines are very competitive, but remember one of those qualities I said about understated excellence?
Okay.
I'd be very disappointed if you had come across a Marine who was giving it all the big one about how great they were. I'd be very disappointed because that's the opposite of what they teach you right from the start. Those qualities and values, I mean, you speak to the youngest recruit all the way up to the oldest veteran and anybody that's ever served in the 360-year history of His Majesty's Royal Marines, they will instantly be able to tell you about those commando values. Courage, determination, unselfishness, and cheerfulness, especially in the face of adversity. Having a couple of decades later gone on to go and be one of the officers in command of all the training, what we do links back to my time as a young recruit and thinking about it. We take these words off a poster on the wall and we place them within young people and we demand that it becomes a way of life. They will be assessed by these qualities, these values every day. And if their behaviour falls outside the boundary of acceptable behaviour, if they show some selfish tendencies, they get spoken to. If they do it again, then they'll have a verbal warning. If they do it again, they'll have a written warning, and they'll go through that.
But you influenced that, didn't you?
Those inspirational leaders, the ones that get some experience and go back to Lympstone as teachers, as trainers, as mentors, as coaches, I like to think we choose some of our very best instructors to go back and go and take our young recruits for training.
But Scotty, you also influenced tremendously that kind of process, didn't you? Because up until then, and you became involved, a lot of people would go along and you were wasting people left, right and centre. They just were kicked off the course or they couldn't make it or they were eliminated in some way. And you actually recognised that there was an opportunity about having some reconciliation and coaching and enabling those people.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of this is not my work. This is something that the Marines have developed. They actually truly came into the 21st century.
Right.
Because if you don't evolve, you die, right?
Right.
And I think the Marines realise one of the greatest innovations, in my opinion, that they introduced, not just through our training at Lympstone, but I think wider across our commando service, was the notion of something called teach, coach and mentor. A teacher stands up, delivers a lesson. A coach hopefully stands by the side of somebody, allows them to perform, steering them in the right direction. And the mentor hopefully stands back, allows them to perform and then gives them feedback afterwards. And I love that notion, that way of doing it. Teacher in front, coach to the side, mentor behind. And as a teacher, I don't know whether you've heard of that sort of way of looking at it, but the Marines invested an incredible amount, and they continue to do so, in making our teachers, coaches and mentors better.
Okay.
So when I went through training, it was pretty brutal at the time. You either cut the mustard or you fell to the wayside, like you were just saying, I think. It was fairly brutal.
How many people did you lose in the first few weeks?
So, I got injured in week 20 out of 32. I was out the game for about 8 weeks, but I couldn't tell you how many we lost in the first few weeks, but it does remind me of something. So we had a young man in our training. We were all aged between 16 and 25, I think. The maximum age for training is at 32, actually. I mean, this 25-year-old lad, the reason I'm saying it, he was a karate black belt, 5th Dan, loaded with muscles.
Yeah.
And all of us looked at him in awe. We were like, I think, looking back on it, probably thought, how can we compete with that? Because the instructors sort of quite liked it. They'd get him out and he'd do all of his, I don't know much about karate, he'd do all his karate moves. And we'd sit and watch that. And I just remember thinking, wow.
When I was at university, actually, I had a guy who I became very, very close to called Nick. And he actually spent some time doing the training. And he was up on the Brecon Beacons with Shay Blythe. Yeah. And Shay Blythe would go around at night nicking rifles off people while they were asleep. And also, Shay Blythe loved the fact that Nick, my mate, could do standing back somersaults. And he used to almost drag him out and say, come here, do a back somersault. And he loved being entertained by the fact that he could do back somersaults. So in a way, that kind of encouragement, and I can imagine now the karate lad being adulated not only by the people, his peers, but also by some of the instructors, by kind of going, oh, look at this.
It's probably the first time that I ever really had imposter syndrome, which is very common. I hear businesses and teams talking about that all the time now, but we can go into that later as well. But I just remember that feeling that I had was probably a little bit like, what imposter syndrome?
What are you doing here?
Yeah, do I deserve to be here? How did I get there in the first place? I'm up against people like this. So that competition was probably enhanced, that sense of competition. It wasn't real. It's probably just in my mind. But I remember then, I think at about week 8 to 10, maybe, our perception of this guy, he struggled in the field, you put weight on him, you made the conditions cold, wet, got tired and hungry, his performance tailed off. Where some of the rest of us, we sort of love that environment and really grew in it. And whilst a lot of it is about team cohesion and coming together and helping people who might be struggling, he quit.
Oh, did he?
He quit. Yeah, in the early stages of training.
And what was the effect on everybody else? Did it kind of permeate through the group? Were people shocked?
As time on, less shocked, actually. He probably had, 25 years old, he got a little bit of life experience. He may have been to college or university or something like that. And, that discipline's probably a little bit easier to deal with, that level of discipline when you're 17 and 18, because you're coming straight from home, straight from school maybe, and you're walking into an organisation, another organisation like school, where you're just told what to do and where to be and what stuff to wear. But I think you got a little bit more experience maybe in life. That culture shock's probably, the divide's probably wider, civilian to military. Personally, talk about wastage rates. I think at the time, probably 10 people like me with afros and roller skates who accidentally walk into a careers office. Probably one will make the Green Beret, because they actually filter quite a few out at the initial recruiting office stage before you get anywhere near them stage. Things have changed a little bit now. I had to do a potential Royal Marines course for 3 days. Where they put you through your paces, and ultimately they filter you so that when you actually start the actual 32-week training course itself, by day one, probably half, maybe even 3/4 of my cohort probably didn't get that far. But then by the time you start your training, the pass rate has always been around 50%. Always, from the start of training, from day one all the way to earn your Green Beret, around 50%. Marines have tried to do things that are going to influence that and to improve those statistics over the years. But I think the flat base rate has always been around 50%, and I suspect it's probably...
Do you remember how you felt when you learnt that he'd actually gone?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a feeling of inwardly, not that I would have admitted it, but it probably enhanced a feeling inside me, as if to say, okay, I'm watching others fall to the wayside or give up. And I learned pretty quickly that the Marines aren't looking for Olympic champions, World Cup winners, the fastest, the fittest, the strongest. They don't care what the Marines want. They don't care what you look like. They don't care whether you're black or Asian or ginger or Scottish. They do not care. But what they do want are team players, strong values, people who will never, ever give in. And I know that. I probably didn't know that at the time, but now I do. That's what we're looking for. And then when you do see people by your side, who you're trying to help as well, because you realise that your collective performance will reach so much higher than any one individual ever will. You learn that quickly as well. You
learn that teams outperform individuals.
You learn it early. You learn these qualities, these values, that integrity, that humility I spoke to you about, that striving for excellence. You realise that you try and cut corners with the Marines during training, you'll get found out. And it won't be me that gets punished, it'll be everybody else around you. That's the way it used to work. Things might have changed now. But if I messed up, they'd pay for it. My brothers would pay for it. So I won't cut corners. I won't try to find the easy route. I'll do things properly. That's going to take more time, more effort, but that's the only way I can do it.
Do you think that's affected your whole approach to everything and the consequences that fall out to other people when you do anything?
Definitely shaped my life and continues to do so.
Talk to me about something that's central to the Marines, which is the beginning, when we started, was about respect. And where does that come from? How is it actually utilised? And where did you experience it in terms of respect?
Yeah, I see 3 types of respect, actually. I think the respect that you got to have for yourself to start with. I think that's critical. I know not everybody likes themselves, but I think you need to be able to be in a position to respect yourself, because I think if you can do that, and if you can conduct activities and conduct yourself with some respect, then I think that allows you to be able to press on with the rest of the things in your life. Of course, then there's the second part, is respect that you have for others around you, albeit they might have different ideas, they might have different skill sets, which the Marines use to their advantage later on. Definitely different ways of doing things. So the second type is that respect you have for others, and hopefully the third type is the respect that others will have for you. I think that those things are all interwoven, and one of the key bedrock values that you have to start with to be able to forge together a winning team.
Are you conscious, or were you conscious when you think about it, as a ranking officer? So you were a major. Were you conscious as you walked around at Lympstone and places like that, that people were looking at you as a role model?
Definitely. There's no doubts about it. So there's the old adage, you go on a parade square, there's 600 Marines on there, a unit or whatever. You got all of your, it's Remembrance Day, or it's a big parade. It don't happen too often. Marines don't do a lot of marching around, but that's by the by. But occasionally you'll do that. Could be a medals parade. And you spend hours getting all your kit and equipment, all of your regalia all ready to put your best foot forward.
But
So we're all waiting for the commanding officer to come on parade.
Okay.
The commanding officer walks down, colonel, and he will inspect each person. But there's only one person on that parade square who is being inspected 600 times. And that is the commanding officer himself. As soon as he stands in front of everybody and inspects them, they're looking back at him. That's probably quite key. That's how you should feel as a person in position of leadership and responsibility. Now, the Marines have leaders at every level. We're pushing on a bit, but having leaders at every level, do you know, sometimes we work in small teams. When I first went to Northern Ireland, 1989, we worked in team 4. So in that team of 4, you had a Lance Corporal in charge, who's one of my biggest influence and greatest mentors in my entire life, and continues to be so. He's the boss, as far as I'm concerned. He only ever got to Lance Corporal, but he's my most inspirational leader. A guy called Pete Lewis, who I'm still best friends with. So he's in charge of a team of 4. But then, if he wasn't there, who's going to be in charge? Well, we've got a second in command of a team of 4. There's actually a third in command of a team of 4 as well. So being a leader isn't about being an officer or about being a commanding officer or leading a whole unit. We have leadership every levels. And importantly, all of those leadership levels all link together. We can talk about our command training.
I'm fascinated by it, because
at some point,
that command structure and how that distills. Let me go back a little bit and actually just take you into a thought as I'm listening to you, because behaviour comes sometimes at just a conscious level. You're thinking about what you're doing preparation, and we anticipate what you're actually going to do. And sometimes it comes about as an unconscious level. How do you help people to take that unconscious behaviour, the right thing to do, that it becomes part of what they do at a conscious level?
One of the central themes around our whole training is something we call train hard and fight easy, right? So train hard's down here, fight easy. One day is up here as well. All that stuff is something you all know all about already. And many people watching this will know about as well. All those little things in the background where you have to have that attention to detail, where you leave no stone unturned, where that things have got to be done to the required level so that you can be prepared and ready the following day, the following week, whenever it is up here.
Okay.
That's what being in the Marines is like every single day, where you make sure and you ensure that you are aspiring to reach that level of excellence in everything that you do. And it starts from cleaning your equipment on camp. It starts from making your bed. And it's the same old adage. If you get the small things right, then when it comes to getting the bigger things right, you've got that attention to detail that's going to be able to do them.
You make me smile only because you make me think instantly how I was almost obsessive, and I mean obsessive, when I was refereeing. And refereeing at first class level, I used to come home and the first thing I did was to clean my boots and take the laces and wash them and wrap them around the radiator to make sure that my white laces were absolutely pristine.
You know, that's respect that you got for yourself, right?
I don't know that I came from there. It came from the fact that it was a big deal. It was a big occasion. And I wanted to make sure that I actually did the best that I could. And I also discovered something really important, which I know is part of the edict of the Marines, which was all about the planning. When the planning was right and I'd anticipated what I was going to do, where I was going to do it, and how I was going to do it, that was so important to how I actually performed.
So you spoke about the conscious and the
unconscious,
and the subconscious.
Yeah.
I think, and I've done a little bit of work in this area as well. You know, consciously you make a decision, it comes from the brain, you work out what you're going to do, and that autonomic response is that subconscious. But I think if you can repeat a skill enough, if you get the training right, then when it comes to the crunch, and you know how, because you've trained so much in it, it almost becomes autonomic about how you do that. But saying that, you also need a team that's got that adaptability and flexibility to be able to change a plan at a moment's notice. That's why during our training, the Marines throw in spanners. They throw spanners in the works all the time so that you then learn to expect the unexpected. You do it so much that when the unexpected happens, it's not even a surprise. You become accustomed to uncertainty, and they put you in this zone during your training, beyond your training, whilst working in jungles and deserts and mountains. You learn to be able to, how to be able to respond to different circumstances, even those that you're not expecting. You gain that experience of being able to deal with anything. And when you realise that you're part of a team that can do anything, then you can move mountains.
Do you have the little voice in your head who's talking to you, or it's talking to you, either coaching you or enabling you, saying, you should have said that, you shouldn't have done that, you should have behaved in a different way? Are you conscious of that?
Yeah, I think so. You know, those boundaries I spoke about are sort of really important. You know where they are. And you know, there's probably a quite deep topic of conversation about ethically doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
Integrity. Do the right thing and not the thing that is easiest. Sometimes doing the right thing is difficult.
Very hard.
As a leader. But you sort of know, don't you? We've got a lovely... We're sidetracking, but I think this is a good one, important one. Especially with sports teams, they really like this one, where the Marines have got a very non-confrontational way where the most junior recruit can check the most senior officer. You know, dauntingly, they wouldn't normally do it, but we've got a lovely way of doing this. So when you earn your Green Beret, we haven't even talked about the training yet.
No, okay.
When you earn your Green Beret, you also get what we call commando flashes. They go on the side of your arm. It says Royal Marines Commando on them. We're very proud of them, like air pellets. So let's say, I'll try and give you an example. The commanding officer's walking down the parade square and a sweet wrapper or something falls out of his pocket onto the floor, and he looks down at it and thinks, oh, someone will pick that up. Right? So that youngest recruit who's just seen that sweet wrapper fall out of the commanding officer's pocket, he's got a choice to make, isn't he? You can either do the easy thing, ignore it, or you can do the right thing. You can pull the commanding officer. You can check him. Right? So the Marines, it's something you learn at an early stage. Right? This has been adopted by a few sports teams, by the way. First of all, you're a Royal Marine, Green Beret. Secondly, maybe even lower than that, you're an officer, whatever rank you are, but that's secondary. You're a Marine first. right? So that young recruit, without fear of it costing him a little bit later on in his promotion or retribution or none of that, without fear of that, he can go up to that commanding officer and say, "Sir, with respect, would you please check your flashes?" And that is just a gentle reminder to that very senior officer to look down at his epaulets. Remind yourself who you are, Royal Marines Commander. "You're right, young man. I'll go back and pick that rubbish up." Really lovely way to be able to engage up and down the chain of command with respect